Good morning, Saints. Well, I'm teaching adult Sunday school again and in this new church where I'm living. And it's a huge blessing because I've been there 6 months, 7 months, and they already asked me to teach, which is just, a huge blessing for me. And I'm going back through, I'm teaching end times. This church doesn't have any real focus on end time events, but they're definitely open to it. And the pastor makes, subtle references to he believes we're in that time or coming into that time. And so when I suggested this topic, because it's my passion, they were all in, they were all for it, and it's been going really good. But I was prepping then. The last 2 weeks I've been doing the rapture. And the part that I didn't get to was the types in the Old Testament that demonstrates sort of a pre-tribulation rapture. And I talked about this one, which we're going to look at, Enoch in Genesis 5 being taken, and then as we see in Genesis 6, then you have the giants, and then you have the flood, and I'm going to draw something out of that. But you also have the type as referenced in Luke 17 explicitly, where he talks about Lot. Remember Lot. And what do we know about Lot? Lot and his family were taken out of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then the judgment came. And that's an explicit type that's given to us in the Bible to look for. He also gave us the type that I think is more tenuous maybe, but Daniel was raised to the right hand of the king, the time Nebuchadnezzar, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went through the fiery furnace. And so again, what happens to the church? You see in Revelation 4 and 5, the church is raised to the right hand of Christ, the king, and then the rest of the world goes into the tribulation period. And so those are the types, or at least some of the types from the Old Testament. I know other people have called out a bunch of others, but I talked about that. And now this week, we're going to talk about pattern in the Bible, and then we're going to talk about the four faces of Christ, because you can see pattern being used in the Bible looking at the Gospels. You take a look at Luke and you compare it to Matthew, I think are the strongest ones, and we can see pattern in Luke 17 and pattern again in Matthew 24. And if you look at the four faces of Christ, you can take a look at Matthew's gospel being to the Jewish people, predominantly calling them that Jesus is their Messiah, and Luke's gospel being an orderly account pitched to the Greek mind. It's a gospel in light of or foreshadowing the church age, which was generally born upon the Gentile nations, right? So we're going to do that. Now this is a little combo because these two things were stirring around in my brain: the pattern of the rapture, and then taking a look at how that plays out in the end times. And Genesis 5:21, we've got Enoch. It's very brief. Enoch lived 60 and 5 years and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. All the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And that's all we got. You see a lot of interesting things here. 365, which is, it's the number of days of the year, right? But if you also want to read a little bit more into it, the Jewish Hebrew year is 354 days following the lunar cycle, then with correction. The 365-day solar year is the Gentile year. And so is that just one more little indication that he used the lifespan of Enoch to prototype the Gentile nation, hence the church being raptured. So I don't know. I think that's kind of cool, but who knows? I might be overreading. But here, so you have Genesis 5, you've got Enoch being raptured. Genesis 6, you've got the giants, and then God declaring that the earth needs to be destroyed because of the wickedness. And then what do you have? You have the flood, right? The actual destruction comes about. And it, the light bulbs went ding, ding, ding. Actually, after I taught it, which is really frustrating, but this is how the Lord works sometimes. I thought that's really interesting how that came to be, because you guys know I am very convinced personally that I'm in Revelation 4 here. First, you have the prototype of the rapture. After this, I looked, and behold, a door was open in heaven. And the first voice I heard was it as a trumpet talking with me, saying, "Come up hither, and I'll show you these things that must be hereafter." And the "come up hither" is, the prototype of the rapture. Matter of fact, the open door in heaven, go back and look, the Church of Philadelphia, Revelation 3, what is that, 10 or 7 through 13 or whatever it is, open door in heaven. It couldn't be more clear. That's a prototype for the rapture, same pattern. But then as you come down, you study who these elders are. They're clothed in white raiment. They have crowns of gold. They're Stephanos. They're not diadems. They're the overcomer's crown, yada, yada, yada. And I can't do that study now, but it's the church in heaven, saints. And the Old Testament prototype for that is 1 Chronicles 24, King David setting up the order and the course of the elders of the clans that we're going to serve, or the tribes that we're going to serve in the temple under Solomon. So you have your prototype. Now you have the fulfillment here with the church. And in 5, he's going to start opening the scrolls, right? And he changes his language to fit that he's going to be judging the Jewish people as well, because he says he's the line of the tribe of Judah, right? And so he changes his language. The name he takes on for himself has to do with coming back for the Jewish nation. And then again, you see the elders here, and they sing a song. He's made us kings and priests, and we shall reign on earth. So bam, it just can't be anything else, right, saints? So there you go, church in heaven, rapture, Revelation 4 and 5, real brief. Just like Enoch, Genesis 5, rapture, real brief. What are you getting in Revelation 6? And again, numbers are coincidence, but I mean the whole pattern is kind of fitting here. Then you get in Genesis chapter 6, the first chunk was about the giants on the earth those days, and they're horribly wicked, requiring judgment. Okay. And now, what do we see here in Revelation 6? You get this pale horse judgment. And, if you haven't seen my videos before, I'm sorry, I'm like wailing through this quick. But in the pale horse judgment here, the fourth seal, it talks about he's killing with, hunger and death and a great sword, but he's also killing with beasts of the earth, therion, venomous wild beast is the definition of therion. But if you do your quick search in the book of Revelation, context is king, right? You come back and you do that. Where is the beast? Well, here's our first reference we just looked at. But then the other therions in the book of Revelation, where do they show up? It's, the beast out of the bottomless pit, the beasts that rise up in 13, which is the Antichrist, and the false prophet is what many interpret, right? Beast all in Revelation 13. So you can see it's not wild creatures attacking humans, but it's these, and I'll just say it's genetically hybrided or Nephilim of some sort, genetic corruption, just like the Old Testament. And then, so let me close that. So the pattern's the same, right? Revelation 4 and 5, you picture the rapture in heaven, just like Enoch in Genesis 5 being taken to heaven. The next thing you see is the beasts in Genesis 6 being described. What do we have here potentially in Revelation 6? You got the beast, the Therion. Let me click off the Strongs. And then you come down here. And then, as you guys know, I'm very settled now that even though the church is in heaven, Revelation 4 and 5, the actual day of the Lord doesn't happen until down here, Revelation 6:16, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come, who shall stand? And that's how I think you reconcile a whole bunch of things, is because just like the age of the law wasn't, well, it was paused, let's say, at the crucifixion of Christ, the actual church age didn't start until Acts 2, right? Didn't start until Pentecost. There's a gap in between the age of the law ending and the actual start of the church age. I think we're seeing the exact same thing here. If you want to see the age of the church, the bride, ends, with the church in heaven, I'm okay with that. I still think the apostate church and those that come to faith after the church leaves are given this one last chance, and you see it in the fifth seal. But the actual start of the day of the Lord, I believe, is down here in 6:16 and 17. And that solves all sorts of problems, like how do they burn weapons for 7 years in Ezekiel 38 and 39 if the day of the Lord started in conjunction with the rapture of the church? There's not enough time remaining. And so this solves all sorts of problems if this is the technical start of the day of the Lord down here. So I can't go into much more than that. I just thought it'd be a blessing if I'd show you that pattern. Genesis 5, Enoch lived 365 years. Is that a prototype for the Gentile church? He was taken and was found not, even though he's walking with the Lord, right? Next thing you see is the beasts of the earth, the Therion, in Revelation 6, just like you see the next thing in Genesis 6 is the beasts, or the Nephilim described. And then in the second half of Genesis 6, you see the actual judgment, Noah's flood. The second half, or the last half of Revelation 6, you see the beginning of the day of the Lord. I think that pattern is really cool, saints. Just wanted to put that out there. That's the end of the teaching. I just want to share one other thing. And let me see if I can do this without screwing up my video. I just come online here. I just wanted to share something that's really cool. I went to we have a Wednesday night adult Sunday school, and the person was teaching on. She's the prayer pastor at the church, and she was teaching on gifts of the Spirit and the separation of spirit, soul, and body. And during this time, she kept coming every night saying her mom's dying of pancreatic cancer. I might not be here next week or whatever. And boom, she was gone for 2 weeks. And she had spent it with her mom, who was in hospice basically. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. And she wouldn't eat. And then they were having to medicate her I think it got down to every half hour pain meds because, her system was shutting down. And she came back, and her mom passed, and her mom was on fire for the Lord. Sounds like the whole rest of her life, at least the latter half of her life. And in the day or two before she died, this pastor was sitting next to her mom, and all of a sudden her mom's face went almost like trance-like. Her arms fell up like this, and she said that her mom, it looked like, almost like, did she die and have, like a spasm or something? She was just hanging on like this, and And then her mom starts to talk, which was in and out of consciousness, not able to talk. And what was really cool is her mom really was impressed, I guess, with Elijah. And all of a sudden she says, I see him, I see him. And she was seeing Elijah, and she was seeing heaven. And what was so darn awesome, if you guys watch any of those near-death experiences, you know what I'm saying is true here. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of commonalities in near-death experiences, so you can almost see the real ones from maybe the false ones. And not every detail is the same, but enough is the same where you know they're seeing something very real. And this is my impression, so take it for what it's worth. So in a lot of these near-death experiences, people see an astonishingly bright light, and they describe it as so bright that you would think your eyes would immediately burn out, but somehow you can look into it or look through it, and many people see the outline of a man in the bright light, but they can't see all the details. And what this pastor was relaying about her mom is the mom described the white light was so bright it looked like a lightning bolt that had struck right in front of her face, blindingly white, and yet she could see into it. And then she started relaying, she had this vision of Elijah and she got to meet him. And at this point, although her arms were still up and everything, she was giggly and giddy, and she just couldn't stop laughing and chuckling. And so here the pastor, the prayer pastor of the church here, was sitting next to her mom, and she was describing this, and you could tell how very real this whole scene was. And after it was over, I guess it was about 10 minutes long, and there were some other details she gave, but it was a little bit sparse on the rest of the details. She had one more, little encounter, half a day later with the Lord, and then it wasn't much longer than that. She died in her sleep. And so I'm going to maybe try and see if she wouldn't record a video that I could post to this channel, because of course I'm leaving a ton of stuff out. But the cool thing for me was it was a very believable story because I knew the person that witnessed it. and the fact that, the person that witnessed it, this prayer pastor, described her mom as on fire for the Lord for her whole life, or at least the last half of her life. I think it was a real heaven vision. And I've heard other people that have passed over or have, died or were in the death throes and saw one of these open visions of heaven. It's like they're right on the edge of leaving. And so I think this really did happen, and it was such a blessing. I guess I want to pass on that, it's believable in the nth degree to me based on who it was coming from and what she witnessed and what she said. And so if there's any doubt in your mind whether the Lord's up there and the Lord's listening and the Lord hears us and the Lord cares for us, that's what I took away from it, is just rock solid proof that the Lord cares. He cares in everything, including this woman in her death throes from pancreatic cancer, blessed her with this vision of Elijah, and then letting her see through the blindingly white light and seeing a vision of heaven. And so I guess I just want to put that out there, saints. If I can get a video of it, I'll post it direct, but I just needed to share it. Hope everybody has a blessed day. God bless. See you soon.